Hey guys, welcome to the show. For this episode of Himprovement, we have another special guest. Her name is Terry McDougall, and she is an executive and career coach and the CEO of the Terry B. McDougall Coaching Company. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Kamani. It's great to be here.
Thank you, and I appreciate you coming on. And so, is there anything that you'd like for the audience to know about you?
Well, you talked about what I do. I'm also an author, and I really work with people who are high achievers that I say are successful but not satisfied. And what I mean by that is that they may be successful when you look at them from sort of the outside, but if you sort of pull back the curtain and get to see what's going on with them in other aspects of their lives, a lot of times they're paying a pretty high price for that. And what I really try to do as a coach is help people expand that overlap between their professional success and their personal happiness so that they get a lot more leverage out of the energy that they invest into their lives and careers.
Okay, and that's pretty interesting. And so, you talked about creating more of an overlap. And so, what are some of the areas where you see there not being that overlap, where they might be happy with what they're doing in their career field, but they're not seeing that same happiness or those positive emotions in other aspects? Could you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. I mean, for a lot of people, maybe they're looking at their career and they're like trying to get a raise or they're trying to move to that next level in their career. And so they're pouring so much energy into it that they may be neglecting other areas of their life. A lot of times when I start working with somebody, part of the reason why they come to me is they're feeling really stressed. And that can come out in many ways. Like maybe they're not spending time on things like exercising or eating right, or they're working late hours and therefore they can't spend time with people that they care about. And so they really don't have that balance. And a lot of times I'll tell you that they will tell me, like, I'm not happy with the way that things are, but I just don't see anything that I can do differently. And part of what I help them to do is, it's kind of twofold. One is to shift their mindset to believe that, if they can imagine what they would like their career and their life to be like, that it's possible. They might not know how to do it yet, but if they just shift that mindset to, believe that what they want is possible, that's the first step. And then the second part of what I work with them on is starting to learn skills or put processes in place so that they can get more leverage out of the energy that they put into their careers. One of the things I see with a lot of times with people is that, if they're not getting the results that they expect or that they want, that they'll just double down on their effort. Like they'll just work longer hours or, they'll try to do more or go faster. And that, if they're already feeling stressed, it basically just exacerbates that. And what I try to get people to do is when they feel that compulsion to like do more because they're not getting the results they want, I actually tell them step back and take a look at the whole playing field, and see if there's a more strategic way or a smarter way to get the results that you want. And, I didn't say this before, but before I became a coach, I worked in the corporate world for 30 years. And I actually coach people that were like me. Like I was a really ambitious person and first generation college graduate. And I didn't really have any role models in my life to tell me, like, this is how you become successful in the corporate world. And so, therefore, I fell on my face a lot and I, was working really hard and not getting the results that I wanted. Now, some lessons I learned the hard way. I also feel like I was lucky that I did have some mentors along the way that sort of pulled me aside and said, gave me the feedback that I needed to do things differently so I could get better results. But that's one of the things that I see quite a lot is that, they're working really hard and they think that that hard work's going to get them something that it's not getting them. And so then they get frustrated and unhappy. And I hate to see that, because if you're working hard, you should get good results out of it.
I agree. And I think it's interesting that you say that, but to make sure that I understand what I guess the path that you're going down, what you talk about is how these people get to a point where they develop an awareness of what they don't like about their life, how they're not getting the results that they intended from working so hard with their career. But I guess you could say the disconnect is that they don't know where to put that effort to fix it. And so you see them either doubling down at work or maybe dealing with in other ways. It might not be productive to what that end goal is. And then something
Hmm.
else that was interesting to me was that you also touched on maybe a lack of mentorship. You even talked about your own experience where maybe not having that second voice to be able to give you advice in these different parts of your life made it to where you might have made some of those same mistakes where you keep doubling down in the effort in the wrong areas or maybe not attacking the issue in the right way. And as a result,
Yeah.
you end up being in that spot where you're successful and unhappy, right?
Yeah, yeah, or and when I say successful but not satisfied, I think that part of the reason for me what that I wasn't, I think people would look at me and be like, oh, she's a smart young woman and she's doing all right. I was doing all right, but I wasn't doing as well as I wanted to, and I also, I had bigger ambitions, and I really felt like I was doing everything that I thought would get me ahead, and there's a lot of, I didn't mention this earlier, but I've written a book called Winning the Game of Work, Career, Happiness, and Success on Your Own Terms. And I think for many people, they don't realize that work really is a game. And, part of the reason why people sometimes aren't satisfied with what, or, they feel like they're not, quote unquote, winning at work is because they don't know the rules of the game. And honestly, nobody necessarily teaches you those either. We'll go into work and think like, okay, well, this is what you're supposed to do at school, or this is what you're supposed to do in your family. So I'm just going to do this at work. And a
Oh,
lot of the things that get you ahead at work are very counterintuitive to the things that we've been taught growing up. And I mean, there's a lot of things like, boundaries. Talk to people about boundaries all the time. I talk to people about, getting clarity around expectations. Sometimes we can make assumptions that maybe people know what we want. We never really ask for the things that we want. Um, and I don't know. There's a million. There's a million of these little things that when I'm working with somebody, that I just try to help them start to learn these lessons. And honestly, I'll tell you, some people will like sort of fight me a little bit on it, and I'll just say, okay, just try it once. Try this thing once and see what happens. See how, if you feel differently. See if people are treating you differently. And a lot of times that is the case. Actually, I mean, I'd love to give you an example of
sure.
that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was actually talking with one of my clients earlier this week, and he works in a very demanding company. It's very demanding field, and very often people are coming sort of the last minute and asking him to do things that are sort of like outside the bounds of what's expected. There's certain not necessarily the rules, but processes that people are
Hmm.
supposed to um, do in order to request things from this person's department.
Right.
And, what he typically would do is just, be like, okay, I'm a good corporate citizen. This is being asked of me. It means I have to work later. It's kind of throwing a monkey wrench in our process, but they're asking of me, so I'm just going to do it. And what happens is that the more he does it, the more people come and ask for those kind of favors and those kind of exceptions.
Oh, like it becomes
And
acceptable, I guess, after
it,
he does
it
it the
becomes
first
it's
time.
it sets a precedent. And a lot of times people are like, I can't say no to this. Like I'm going to be painted, as a bad performer, or not a team player if I say no. And what I tell people, I totally understand that. Like, you got to play the political game. You can't just be like, no, that's, you're breaking the rules. But here's what you can do in those kind of situations, and this is what I told him to do, is that get clarity around what are the boundaries, like what is the actual process that needs to happen. And if you've got people around you that are infringing on that process, go around to everybody and just reinforce that, like, and give them the feedback. Like, half the time people on your team are coming in late and, curious what's the issue. If there's something that you can do to sort of systematically fix it, great. But, let the people that are around you know what the proper process is, because maybe that's part of the issue. But then when somebody comes and you decide to uh, do something for them that's sort of out of the normal process, make sure they know this is an exception, that you tell
Okay.
them, I'm going to make a one time exception for this. Here's what the actual process is. I'm making an exception for you this one time. And then you do it, right? You want to maintain the
Hmm.
relationship and so forth. But
Right.
people appreciate things a lot more if you like value what you're doing and you tell them. Because I think that a lot of time, we were talking before about it setting a precedent, sometimes people don't know that that's not the normal way. Like if you just quietly always deliver on what they ask, they just think that's the normal way. And then, we're sort of over in the corner, like quietly suffering, and getting resentful and stuff like that. And that's not healthy for anybody, right? Or we're
Right.
working longer and longer hours
I
because
agree.
people don't understand where the boundary is. We can allow people to overstep the boundary, but we need to let them know, like, this is a one-time thing. I'm letting you do this time. And it gives you more leverage and power to maintain that boundary in the future if you tell people when they've overstepped it.
Okay, that definitely makes sense. And I'm glad that we
Hmm.
touched on this because there's something else I like to kind of get into in
Hmm.
this realm of things. And so we talked about setting the boundaries and everything. And since I guess you could say the target audience of this podcast is a little bit younger, most of these guys,
Hmm.
they might be working like their first job or like, some part-time
Hmm.
job in college, or like me, first year analyst in a certain role or something. And so I guess
Hmm.
would you say that it might be a little bit more of a challenge, especially for somebody that's new on the job and doesn't have, I guess, tenure, like you could say, to be able to set these
Hmm.
boundaries? What tips would you give to kind of navigate that sort of situation?
The thing I think is really important in a role like that is to get clarity around expectations. Sometimes supervisors can think that they've been clear about expectations, and it's everything from like specifically what's well, I'm just giving an example. Maybe you've heard of SMART goals, and the thing that's great about SMART goals is that it's very specific in terms of whether the goal's been met or not. And I hope I can remember all of the acronym words for SMART, but it's specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. So those are all the things that that's the acronym for SMART. And if you are asked to do something, it's important to get the kind of clarity around what's expected, specifically what's expected here, and how will we know if it's met. If you say, like, okay, process these forms, okay, well, how many of these forms do I need to process by what time, you know and getting clarity on that on the front end makes later communications a lot clearer, right? Because
Right.
sometimes people can make assumptions that maybe a new person is more knowledgeable than they are. Because sometimes if you're new in a company, maybe your boss has worked there for 20 years and they can't even remember what it's like coming in as a new person. They can't even remember like all of the steps that you're supposed to take, so they might make assumptions, and then later when you're not fulfilling on their expectations because you didn't know all of the things they expected, they may still blame you.
Right.
And so that's where you can kind of step out and just get that clarity, ask for that clarity. And then once you have that clarity, and then you've got something to sort of compare your own performance to have like more meaningful conversations with your boss.
Hmm.
You might get some clarity also about whether you can maybe make a process more efficient, things
Right.
like that.
Right. And I think, in a lot of situations, it might not even just be the boss that's giving you some of these extra assignments. Let's say someone
Hmm.
else that's in your group that might be an analyst as well, but has been there for a few more years, might need help with
Hmm.
some sort of project. and they think that they can just put that on your plate. And I think tying back to the thing you said about the SMART goals, making sure that you actually get specifics about whatever that assignment is, that can also give
Mhm.
you an idea if it's even something that you can handle in the first place before you say yes.
Mhm.
And then when it comes to saying yes, one thing that I also like to ask you about is how could a first year analyst or somebody that's brand new on the job get comfortable saying no when they know that it's not in their best interest to take something, and especially if it's not something that falls within their job description. First, I guess, would you recommend saying no? And also, if
Mhm.
you do, how can they go about that, making sure that they fit into the office politics game, like you were saying?
Mhm. Yeah, I think first of all, understanding again, like sort of the field that you're playing in. Like, where are the boundaries? Like, who has authority to assign you work?
Right.
I've seen it tons where, there's players in the workplace. Like, I'm not gonna lie, right? There are people that want to come in and get their paycheck and get other people to do the work for them. And a lot of times they will identify those new people that don't know
Hmm.
any better, and they'll come by and they don't even have the authority to assign the work, but they'll come by and be like, hey, can you help me out with this? Or, and
Right.
getting clarity around who has that authority to assign you work is really important. And you know, getting clear with your boss, like, okay, this guy in the next department's always coming by and asking me for help with stuff. Is that something I should be doing? I've definitely had it in my career when I was a manager, that I discovered after the fact that people were coming to people directly on my staff and asking them to do stuff that I wasn't aware of. And when
Ah,
people brought it up to me, I could go to that person and say, you know, don't go directly to my people, right? Like, if you want something, you come to me and I'll decide whether it's something that we can do. But when it comes to, like saying no yourself or putting that boundary up yourself, like, I actually have like a whole section in my book on this, like ways to say no without saying hell no. And one of them is, like, for example, if you've got work, your own work that needs to be done, and somebody's kind of coming to you and saying, and it's not your boss, right? Or it's a
right.
colleague or somebody like that, and you've got your own deadlines, you've got your own responsibilities, like, you can just say to them, you know, I have stuff I have to finish up first. If you want to come back to me at the end of the day and I'm done and I have some time, I'll help you out. But right now I've got other priorities, right? I mean, that's one thing that you can do. I think the other thing is that if you're looking at, say something that's being done and you see a better way to do it, like maybe it can be done more quickly, you can build a tool or a process to get it done more, routinely without so much, manpower. Um, you can go to your boss maybe and just say, hey, is there any reason why we have to do it this way? Because I have an idea about maybe how we could do it better. Um, I've certainly seen it sometimes too, where there's a glitch in the process, and that's what causes people to come and need help all the time. And if we get curious about, like, why is it that people get stuck here? Why is it that they don't have access to that information and they always come to me to get it? Right? Maybe it's just a matter of being like, would it be helpful if you got access to the system,
Oh,
and you could look it up yourself,
okay.
you know?
Okay.
So, just sometimes getting curious. And, I think I said it before about, sometimes people just want to work harder and do more. And really, if you step back and you look at the bigger picture and you're like, oh, maybe if I just give them like a little FAQ document or a little tool or something like that they can do this for themselves. They
Mhm.
don't have to come to me and get me to always do it for them.
Okay. I think that's extremely valuable what you just brought up, because I wasn't even thinking of it along those lines, where instead of I guess always finding ways to say what's not in the job description so you don't have extra work, maybe think about what's a way that I could offer value to where people can get the answers and the documents or reports that they need, but it won't put as much strain on me. And it also builds my standing with the company. And I think that's actually great, because if entry level analysts thought like that, How can I offer more value to the group? It makes it to where when things go, later down the road, and maybe they're looking to people for promotions, or let's say you're in an industry where they do layoffs a lot of the time, making yourself that person that's indispensable, that person that's a critical thinker, that person that has a person that has the ingenuity, it makes it to where you become indispensable. And so I'm glad that you brought that up.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, really, work is all about, it's not about coming in and doing tasks. It's about, having impact that provides value for the organization. And, it's not about making widgets, right? Like how many hours you put in or how many little things you make, right? Because that may or may not be adding value. And a lot
Right.
of times with organizations and industries, maybe there was a process or a system that was put in place a long time ago and that made sense then, but they haven't updated it, and I think with, the entry level analysts, a lot of times they're the ones that are on the front line. And if they're looking and saying, why do we have to take this step? It doesn't seem to make sense to me. The boss, maybe they had that job 15 years ago, like, and things have changed a lot, and so if you can, just get curious and maybe ask some smart questions like, hey, I could be wrong, but it seems like this is an extra step that's not needed in this process. Am I right? Or is there a reason why we're doing this? You might be able to re-engineer something. You might be able to just figure out a better way of doing it. And, to your point, companies like that,
Yeah.
they're gonna be looking and saying, that guy is thinking outside the box.
Yeah, I agree. And that's something that they kind of harp on at my job. And so I'm a financial analyst in oil and gas. And that's one of the things that I've noticed that a lot of those guys that everyone in different departments know, the guys that get those opportunities to do like financial development programs and such. If you look at their track record, you can see the impact that they made on the organization and whatever group they were in. Like one of the groups that I used to be in, I noticed that they had this one guy whose name was on every single desk guide, every single FAQ page. And I noticed that he just took all that free time that he had in between his actual role and looked at some of the stuff that the people within the group always went to him for and always needed. And he took the
Hmm.
time in his free time during work hours, of course, to have that stuff done. And so you can't really look at anything for that group without his name being on it. And so I can definitely see where you're coming from. And I guess while we're on this topic too, something else that I'd like for you to touch on a little bit is also, I mean, since you talk about people being satisfied with their work and everything, is what are some tips that you would give to young people to help them to be able to figure out what exactly it is they want to do when they go into a role? Because I feel like a
Yeah.
lot of guys, and myself included to a degree, you look at the company, you look at, I guess, the prestige of the job and such. But then once you get there, especially when you don't have a lot of experience in the role yet or knowledge about the company, it's kind of hard to navigate and see exactly what direction you want to go in, if that makes
Hmm.
sense. Do you kind
Yeah,
of see what I'm
totally.
saying?
Yeah, I absolutely see what you're saying, and I put that in the category of you don't know what you don't know, right?
Right.
And you're basing, maybe thinking like, oh, I think I want to work at this company on what you can see, right? But once you're in there, I mean, part of it I think is just doing the job for a while and letting yourself see what do I like about it, what do I not like about it, and I think that an opportunity that many people squander when they go to work for companies is that opportunity to network. And one of the things that, I mean, I was a senior level person in a large bank, and I had a lot of respect for people that would, that were more junior, that would reach out to me and say, I'm really interested in what you do and I'd like to learn more about it. Could I set up 30 minutes to come by your office and just talk to you about what you do?
Right.
And I think that that shows a lot of, um, it's just smart because, like, once you're in the organization, you already have something in common with the people. And, a lot of times, leaders, when they get to a certain level, like, they know people at their level, they know the people they interact with, but they don't know,
The
the
analysts, the
newer,
young people.
yeah, they don't know the younger people. But if you differentiate yourself by raising your hand, by saying like, hey, I checked out your LinkedIn profile and I see you used to work here and now you work here and I'd love to know more about, what you do. um, I think that shows courage and it shows initiative. And it also, makes people know who you are. After that, I mean, I know we're not in the office right now, but, after that, if you're, in the cafeteria or local Starbucks and, they see you, they're going to know who you are because you've spent 30 minutes with them and being curious and asking smart questions and letting them know, you know, what your background's like what did what did you major in? Like, why did you
Okay.
decide to go work for that company? Um,
Makes sense.
I yeah, and
Yeah.
honestly, I think that finding people doing things that you think looks interesting is the fastest way to know whether it might be a good fit for you or not.
Okay.
Because everybody that works at these companies was once a young person like you. Even when you look at them and they're like 60, and you're like, oh my gosh, could they were just like that since the beginning of time. No, at one point they were also a young college graduate coming into the workplace and figuring it out for themselves, and they generally can relate. If and I think asking questions like, you know, I was a finance major, and, have you ever seen a finance major be successful in this kind of role? Or how did you get to where you are? What attracted you to your profession? What have you ever seen somebody with my background have success in that? Just it's
Yeah.
a it's something that makes sense to do if you're in an organization, and you want to learn more about opportunities.
I can see where you're coming from, and it makes sense. And I can even say that, I've seen the value in doing that while I've been on the job because, of course, you have an understanding of what the business does, on a large scale, like looking at it from the top down. But whenever you actually get into the company itself and you're in your role, you start to see it. There's so many different aspects of the business and roles that you could get involved in. And it's kind of hard to really have an idea of what everything does and where you would fit into the organization. And so that networking piece that you talked about, that I would say that is a pretty solid solution to that. And I can see the value just from the people I've networked with so far, talking to people who used to be in that same position not too long ago, talking to some people that are like mid-level managers and such, and getting insights from them, telling them what your skills are, what your interests are, the type of work you want to get into, and then
Hmm.
them from their knowledge that they have, giving you, I guess you could say, a guide for where you could kind of fit in. And so that's something that I've been
Yeah,
doing recently in my
yeah,
role. And so I'm glad that you brought that up because I think that probably is the best thing you can really do whenever you move
yeah.
into a new company and you want to kind of figure out where you fit in.
Yeah, definitely. And let me tell you, give you a little insight into what happens when people do that, when young people do that. Senior level leaders talk about it. They will say, you know what, that, Kamani set up time with me to come, ask me questions about my role. Like, he's an impressive young guy. Like, they will talk about it. You differentiate yourself, you pull yourself out of the crowd, and leaders like to see that. They like to see people that are thinking about their career path, that are, already starting to think about what they have to do. A lot of times, um, well, I guess I will say this just up front: each person is responsible for their own career. And that's also one of those kind of unwritten rules that we're not aware of a lot of times. Because, like, when we're in school, it's like, all right, when June comes and you've done all your work for 10th grade, you just automatically get promoted to 11th grade, right? Like, you don't have to do anything, besides do your homework and stuff. You don't really have to do anything. You just automatically get promoted. And that can get us in this mindset of like, well, if I just show up every day and do my job, that at some point I'll get promoted. And that may be the case, but when you think about what you want, and you ask for what you want, or you explore to see what you want, that shows leadership. And people that demonstrate leadership get promoted. People that sit in the corner and wait for somebody to come tap them on the shoulder will be sitting in the corner for a long time.
And so I think that that's something that a lot of people miss as well. And I can even see that, with some of my peers and such, how they kind of take this attitude as if the results that they want from their career or even in life are going to just
Hmm.
come, by someone else handing them to them. And I remember another guest that
Hmm.
I had, Asaf Luxembourg, he talked about being the CEO of your life. And what he meant by that was, essentially taking initiative, knowing what type of results you want, and saying, what can I do to enforce that type of change in my career and in my life? And so I'm glad that you brought that point up,
Yeah.
because, at the end of the day, you can't expect other people to care more about your career than you do.
Yeah, and I will, tell a little bit on myself that even when you do care, like I always very much cared about the development of my staff, but sometimes managers and leaders, they're busy. They got their own jobs, right? They're like worried about
Right.
pleasing their boss and putting the budget together, and in my case, putting the marketing plan together and interfacing with the people, the business leaders. And one time it was relatively new people that had been brought into my team, but still, there was somebody who was a manager and he had somebody reporting to him, and the manager left. He got another job. And I just sort of automatically just was like, okay, called HR and I was like, okay, we got to, put a posting up to fill this job. And somebody else on the team came and said, well, how about, you know, Matt, the junior person on that team? Did you think about promoting him? And I was like, no, I didn't think about promoting him at all. I mean, it just kind of slipped my mind. I didn't know him that well because he was relatively new under my team. But, I reached out to him and had a conversation with him, and he was like, "Yeah, I'd be really interested in that role." And I felt a little bit bad that I didn't think about that. But had this other person not said something to me, I would have totally skipped over even considering that person for the role, and not out of because I thought poorly of him or anything. And in fact, he did end up getting promoted into that role. But had somebody not said anything to me, he would have never had that opportunity.
Right. And so I guess he should have been the one to take that initiative to put his name on the ballot, I guess you can say, to give
Yeah,
himself the opportunity
to
to be
raise his
his own
hand.
advocate.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes and this is the truth too, that sometimes people don't want to be promoted. They're like, I like my job. I want to come in every day and just do this job, get my paycheck and go home. Right? So I don't know whether you're one of those people that's super ambitious or you're somebody that just likes their job the way that it is. And, sometimes I think we think that people can read our minds and, either think that, oh, well, doesn't everybody want to be promoted? Or, you know, why would I want that job? It's more stress. You just got to speak up for yourself.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And so, since we're kind of touching on some of these different areas where people might struggle or may, have different lapses that lead to them not getting the results that they want, there was something else I wanted to bring up that you talk about in your content a little bit. And so, you talk about knowing the difference between barriers, hurdles, and gaps. And so, could you kind of talk
Hmm.
about that a little bit to give the listeners an idea of what you mean?
Yeah, definitely. So, when we're not getting the results that we want, it's because of one of these things. It's a barrier, a hurdle, and a gap. And there are differences. A barrier is something that you can't get past. I mean, it might be that, you want to be a lawyer and you don't have a law degree. Right now, you're not going to be, that's a barrier, right? You can't become a lawyer today if you don't have a law degree. Or it could be that you want to do something, but it's actually illegal, right? So you can't do that. That's a barrier. A hurdle is something that it stands in the way, but with some effort, you can get over it. Okay. It could be that, um, some of the things that we talked about earlier, like people are coming or assigning you work and you're working too many hours and, you don't have the time to, focus on something that you need to do. Well, you might need to like go talk to your boss and get approval to set that hard boundary, so that you can, get that work done. I don't know. Actually, I don't really know if that's like a great example, but it's something that with some effort, you can get past it,
Right.
right?
And it could be internal too,
And
right? Like a personal
it,
constraint.
yes, absolutely. And often it is. It might be a belief that, they never promote anybody that's, you know, only been here for 6 months, right? And
Ah,
if we're
okay.
not showing up appropriately because we're telling ourselves something, that could be a mental hurdle. Maybe we say, like, you know what, I'm going to show up and provide as much value as I possibly can, and I'm going to let people know the value I'm bringing. And maybe that's going to help you get over that hurdle so that you can be considered for promotion. And then the gap is something that, it's sort of like, it's like a hole, right? It needs to be filled in. Maybe you need some training, right? Maybe there's something that you don't have right now that you need. And it could be that you go to your boss and you say, I'd like to get some training on some software program or some, leadership program or whatever that is going to fill in that gap that you currently have. But it's important to be able to look at the challenges you're facing and decide, is this a barrier, a hurdle, or a gap? Because if you're treating a barrier like a hurdle, you're going to expend a lot of energy on something that
That you
is
can't
not
beat.
going to get you. It's not going to get you anywhere. Or maybe if it does get you someplace, you're going to end up in jail or something,
Oh,
because it's, if it's illegal and you're like, I'm
yeah.
doing it anyway, right?
Yeah, definitely
That's
wouldn't
right.
want to do anything like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think illegal
No.
advice is in the book, right?
Right. Exactly.
All right, all right. And so to kind of stay on this, what would you say are some of the hurdles that you see men running into, or I guess young men? And so some of the ones that I think would pop into my mind would be like, let's say, for example, just like with the career search, a hurdle that could pop up. Maybe not wanting to take a job that will be looked down upon. Like for example,
Hmm.
doing maybe teaching or nursing or something like that.
Hmm.
It's kind of seen as like
Yeah.
a woman's job. And so what
Hmm.
advice would you give to guys that are, I guess, not giving themselves potential opportunities that might work for them and their
Hmm.
skill set because of outside expectations or what other people would think?
Yeah. I work with people from, their 20s to their 60s, and I would say that probably one of the biggest reasons for unhappiness is when people are looking for external validation.
Ah,
Um,
okay.
and, so when people are happy, it's because they've gotten in touch with their true self, and they've been honest with themselves about what their wants and their needs are, and that they have set their goals based on, kind of their own inner wisdom and their own inner desires. And I'm not talking about, like the external flashy trappings of success. I'm talking about, like, who are you as a person, and what kind of, role is going to fulfill that. And, I'm not going to say, I mean, I'm the last person to say that like money and that kind of stuff doesn't figure into it. It certainly figured into it with me. Like, I wanted a job that I made a good amount of money, but I wasn't going to do any job to make a lot of money. I wanted to
Right.
do something that was aligned with who I am as a person, where I could show up and use my strengths and the things that I like to do and I felt fulfilled by. And so I think just being honest with yourself about that and trying to really separate, you know, I mean, honestly, like maybe going into a room or doing some writing or something to really say, like, what is it about me that, what are my true strengths, right? And have it be separate from what other people think, right? Um, because honestly, nobody else is I'm not saying people don't judge, because obviously they do, but other people actually don't have the right to judge you. And so
Hmm.
we can be like, who cares what you think, right? Like, I'm doing this because I feel happy about it. And honestly, I think sometimes whenever we do that, it actually inspires other people to be like, oh, well, if that person can do what they want, and then I'm going to do what I want too. It empowers other people. But there are a lot of exercises and stuff that people can do to really do the introspection and think about, where do I want to live? Like, how much money do I want to make? Do I need to go back to school? Do I want to go back to school to get this? What
Right.
kind of skills do I want to use? Do I want to work with people, with data, with ideas, with machinery? Like thinking about like what excites you. And I actually, a lot of times when I'm working with people that want to make a career pivot, but they're not sure. They know that what they're doing isn't working. They don't like that, but they're not sure what they want to do next. I say, look around yourself and, who are the people that you feel jealous of? Who are the people that you're looking at and you're like, man, I wish I had that job, right? I wish I could travel, or I wish I could, work in that environment or whatever. And and if you're feeling that like little bit of envy, like take a look at it and say, what is it about that that's making me wish that I could do that? You know,
Oh, okay.
um, and let that grow. But there's a book called "What Color's Your Parachute" that I I feel like I was so lucky at the beginning of my career that my college boyfriend's mom gave me that book when I graduated, and she said, "Do not even apply for jobs till you've done all the exercises in this book." And I'm so happy that she told me that because I just wanted a job that paid more than the $5 an hour I was making at the library in college,
Right.
and so I would have just gone out and probably taken the first job that I got offered. But because she was like, do the work to know yourself first, and then you can focus more specifically on the areas that will be a good fit for you. And that was really good advice. And not only that, but when I interviewed, when I went in, I could talk about why I'd be good at that job because
You could
I
give like
thought about
actual
why.
answers as opposed to like
Yes,
coming up
instead of like,
with crap, that you would
I'm a
give in like
hard
any other interview.
worker. Yeah, I'm a hard worker and I'm a
Right.
people person, right? Like I could
Right.
talk about the fact that I'm creative and I took a lot of art classes in school, and I my first job was with the publishing company in the advertising sales department. So it had kind of a creative aspect to it. And so I could talk about those things that were really personal to me that fit and aligned with what they were looking for. um, so I mean that's advice that I have, but I also would say goes back to what I was saying earlier, that again, if you're looking at somebody that's doing something that you think looks interesting, talk to them.
Check it out.
And yeah, and even if they don't work at your same company, if you've got any, maybe it's somebody in your family, or it's somebody that went to your college or high school or whatever, maybe it's I don't know, you have some kind of affiliation with, here's how you approach somebody like that. Because a lot of times people are like, networking, like, I don't want to do that. That sounds like scary and hard and weird. But how you do it is that you approach the person and you say, I'm starting to think about the next chapter in my career. And I admire what you do, or what you do looks interesting. And I'm just wondering if you would have, 20 minutes to talk to me about it. People like to talk
Uh-huh.
about themselves. They like to tell you their stories of how they got to where they are. Most people do. And and I'll tell you from like coaching many people that most of the time people are like, I'm scared, I don't want to do it. And I just say, listen, it's flattering to people that you when you do that. And I would say 90% of the time people come back and they're like, that was fun. That was real. That person was really nice. I got a lot of information and they introduced me to some other people. And the other 10% of the time, it could be that they're like, it was like pulling teeth to talk to them, or they never call me back or something like that. And you know what? Like, you got to kiss a lot of frogs. Not everybody understands how to network. Not everybody is, open to those kind of conversations, but a lot of people are. And, a lot of times those kind of conversations can also directly lead to jobs, and if they get to know you and they're like, hey, that he's a sharp young man, and I'm in a position to, maybe introduce him to somebody, or we might even have an opening in our department, you know?
Okay, I see.
Yeah,
Yeah, so it looks
it
like we covered.
happens.
Yeah, we definitely covered a lot on this topic. When you talked about
Hmm.
the first part with knowing yourself, getting rid of that external validation, I guess you can say, and making sure that as long as whatever you do aligns with what you value, that's what you should put priority on. And another thing I like to touch
Hmm.
on with that is that we give so much weight to what other people's opinions might be of what we do. It's almost as if we think that we're so important that these people take all this time out of their day thinking about what it is that we
Yeah.
do. And really, that's not the case. Like 99% of the time, people are thinking about what's going on in their regular day. And so, why should we put any weight on what they might, uh, what their view might be on what we do whenever it's something that
Hmm.
we have to live with at the end of the day? And so, I'm glad that you brought that up. And
Yeah.
then, as far as
It,
like the networking to learn about some of those opportunities and acknowledging that you might be jealous of some opportunities that someone else is getting, and a lot of people, instead of reaching out to that person, they might just hold those feelings and stay in their current situation. But I think that's great that you talked about
hmm.
humbling yourself, going to that person and getting some advice, because at the end of the day, with something that's so important and something you're going to be spending at a minimum 40 hours a week
Hmm.
doing for multiple years, you should definitely make that the priority over your pride or anything else. And so I
Hmm.
definitely am glad that you brought that up, because I think those are some valuable points that a lot of these guys could take as they move forward into their careers.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% about, most people are not thinking about us as much as we think they're thinking about us, because they're thinking about themselves, or they're worried about what other people think of them. And also, around the whole idea of judgment, I'm not going to say people don't judge, because obviously people do judge, but typically when people judge hard, the reason why they're judging is because somebody else is taking action that feels threatening to them. They're kind of like looking and they're saying, hey, that guy's following his dream, and look at all
Oh,
the stuff he's doing. So I'm going to like talk crap about him, because if he's doing it and he's being successful, that might mean I need to get out of my comfort zone and go do that too.
so it's making
Right.
them
So,
self-reflect, I guess you can say. That's why you're coming up in
and they'll get
conversation.
defensive. Yeah. Sometimes
Ah,
they'll get
okay.
a little defensive around it, like, and want to talk, down about people rather than admiring their drive and their initiative. And, who's got, honestly, like, don't listen to the haters, just do you, right?
It's your
And
life, right?
yeah, and you will rise to a point where you'll be around other good, positive people that will probably be supportive of you, rather than, trying to hold you down with where they are.
Yeah.
That's how a lot of people use judgment, is they're like, you're trying to rise, and I feel comfortable just sitting here, down on the bottom level.
I can
I
I
want
can
you to stay
definitely
with me.
relate. I can definitely
Yeah.
relate to what you're talking about, because I've had similar experiences myself, just throughout life, trying to
Mhm.
get new experiences, do new things, and having those type of obstacles that you run into, where you might get negativity from the very people that you thought
Mhm.
were supposed to be supporting you the
Yeah.
most. And so I think that's something that they
Right.
should definitely consider as well. And I'm glad that you brought it up. And so we are running a little bit short on time. And so I'll hop into something else that I wanted to talk to you about really quick, just so we can make sure we touch on it. And so this is I guess this topic is a little bit out of the normal scope of I guess what you would talk about with
Mhm.
career coaching and that sort of thing, but I think it's definitely important, because this is something that a lot of guys struggle with in the workplace. And I will say that it's lack of sexual discipline. And what I mean by that is, talking to women in the workplace, I'm sure that you probably have stories about that, but examples that I can think of are, CEOs
Mhm.
or upper level managers uh, having
Yeah.
relations with secretaries and things like that, pretty much risking it
Yeah.
all, their whole career, their $500,000 salary, all for just that thrill. And so, I guess, what are your thoughts on that? What do you think is like the
Yeah.
motivation behind that? Why do you think guys would be willing to throw away so
Well,
much for this type of
right.
stuff?
Well, I mean, it's thrilling, and it feels powerful, and they think they can get away with it, right? I think that's probably at the heart of it. I mean, I'm a woman, so I'm not really sure. I guess I've observed it a lot in my life in terms of, I suppose that there's like a, certain sex drive, and people have done this and it's fun, it's reinforcing. But when you look at discipline around your career, and especially now more than even in the past, because of like the Me Too movement, and a lot of behavior is coming to light that was there for a long time, but it got swept under the rug, or got paid off and had signed NDAs and stuff like that. Even very, very powerful people are, falling victim to their bad behavior these days. But, I know you and I talked before we hit record, and I do have a story from an organization where I worked, where there was a very senior level leader. He was an executive vice president, and he reported directly to the CEO. He was a very charming, great guy from what we could tell, smart, very well thought of within the organization. Um, but he had a girlfriend that would come into, and he was, probably 50 at least, who would come into the office, and they would have their rendezvous in the office. And I suppose that after a while, it got to be somewhat of an open secret that this was happening. And his wife got wind of it. And of course, I wasn't there, but I heard the rumors at work that I think maybe like her attorney came when the woman was there, and they ended up, she ended up divorcing him, and it became a huge scandal. He had to resign from the company. He was probably making millions of dollars a year, and he was what a lot of people thought was the heir apparent to succeed the CEO. So, you have to ask whether that thrill was worth it,
Yeah, I
right?
mean, I'm sure in hindsight it probably wasn't worth it. And I guess to kind of relate it to the people that be listening to this, I've even seen situations where, people would fraternize with people that were kind of on their level too, like from different jobs that I've done
Hmm.
in the past.
Hmm.
Definitely not now, or at least, from what I've seen, but like different internships that I did, as well as on campus jobs, sales jobs that I've done in
Hmm.
the past, seeing a lot of guys see attractive women that were in the workplace with them, and they were willing to potentially risk their all their income to try and get chances with these girls. And so it was just amazing to me.
Hmm.
Of course, I can see the temptation being a guy,
Sure.
but I just wanted to kind of bring it up because I feel like that's something that I feel like if we kind of encourage guys to kind of look at it from the perspective of there's so many other options outside of your workplace that won't, potentially destroy your income that you go pursue.
Yeah,
And I guess the
totally.
reason why they pursue the ones that are in the workplace is just because of proximity and because it seems like it's
Yeah.
easier. And I mean, you have, a lot more opportunities because you're seeing them every day. But that's just something that I kind of wanted to bring up, that anybody that might have a situation like that where, someone at work might be being flirty with you, right, and everything, you kind of have to ask yourself, is it really worth it? Is this really something that I want to take the risk and do?
And let me also point out the fact that you might think that more senior level people don't know what's going on, but they do. People talk, right? And if
Right.
there's like
People notice
some
things.
something going on, the great, yeah, exactly. They're like people. I've heard this too. Like, hey, do you notice that these two are always leaving work at the same time, or that they're like
Talking at
flirting,
the
or that they
happy
have
hours
lunch
and
together?
everything.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. And, depending on how that's handled, that actually could have an impact on,
Moving up, maybe,
your
right?
ability to, yeah, absolutely, because they may look and say, that's not showing good judgment, or maybe there's going to be some favoritism there if we promote this person, right? And they might favor their boyfriend or their girlfriend that, or whatever, their hookup that they've been hooking up with. I think it's just, it makes sense to have some separation between, you know, your personal life and your work life. You know, so it doesn't, so they don't affect each other. And then, of course, you know, we didn't even go into like, what if it's a bad breakup, right?
Oh yeah, that
You
could
know,
create, even different
right,
problems,
right,
on the back end of
exactly.
things. So, but
Yeah.
yeah, I'm glad that we touched on that. And so it pretty much wraps up our time. And so I guess just as like, last thing, is there anything else that you like to add or tell the listeners that you think that they could gain some value from before we close it out?
Well, I would say if people have liked some of the tips that I've shared, I do have a blog on my website, and my website's terrybmcdougall.com, and you can find like short articles out there on a lot of different workplace topics. And, you know, I've got my book also, Winning the Game of Work, Career Happiness and Success on Your Own Terms, and that's available on Amazon. So, you know, if you want to go deeper, both of those places are a good place to go.
All right, great. And I'll make sure to have all those links in the description as well. I'll make sure to coordinate with you to make sure all that's included. But I guess that pretty much wraps it up, guys. So thank you for coming on the show, and thank you for listening, everybody.